everyone. Welcome to the Orphic Astrology channel. My name is Natalya Alas, and today we are joined by Devon Malone of Selene's Gateway to discuss the new moon in Scorpio. Reverend Devon Malone is a butcher, poet, tarot slinger, and astrologer. He resides in the natural wonderland of the Pacific Northwest on Turtle Islands in the now called city of Portland, Oregon, formerly the territory of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, and Cathlamet people. Devon has a love for liberating people into their own understanding of self by connecting people's spirits to the interconnected reality through their astral charts, the natural world, and coherent experience. He also loves staring at the stars, going on walks, and making flower wines with his love and partner. The Rev Dev was born with the full moon in Scorpio, and we have had many great conversations around astrology and history, philosophy, and so many topics through my book club and on my Patreon. And he recently launched his own Patreon, which we'll link below and talk more about at the end for those who would like to support his work. So I'm excited that you could join me today to talk about this most intense lunation. Welcome, Rev Dev.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's you know, it's just an I feel like it's just going to be another imprint of interesting times that we're living through.
Yeah,
Hashtag interesting times.
interesting indeed. I'm grateful to unpack this most intense new moon with you. So let's get into the chart. This new moon goes exact at 6:46 a.m. Universal Time or 7:46 a.m. in West Africa time in my location on November 20th, or 10:46 p.m. Pacific Time, November 19th, in your location in Portland. The lunation is happening at 28 degrees Scorpio, coinciding with the Mercury inferior conjunction, also known as the Mercury retrograde Cazimi, at 28 degrees Scorpio. So this is a very rare event where the lunar Cazimi aligns with the Mercury Cazimi. It marks the end of the previous lunar cycle and the start of the next, and the end of the previous mercurial cycle and the beginning of the next. This Mercury retrograde Cazimi also marks the midway point of Mercury retrograde, when the psychopomp and messenger of the gods transitions from appearing as an evening star to a morning star. Mercury will begin to rise as a morning star a few days later on the morning of November 25th, conjunct Venus, as Venus prepares to go under the beams of the sun. So Mercury will be passing their torch to Venus. The new moon on the 20th takes place in the third decan of Scorpio, which is traditionally ruled by Venus. In Scorpio 3, the desires of Venus go through a process of distortion, putrefaction, and ultimately dissolution to reach their fulfillment. This decan is associated with separation and transformation, with the dissolution and putrefaction of desires back into their prima materia, or the returning of unfulfilled attachments and desires back to their source to achieve a different satisfaction. The precursors to the transformation associated with Scorpio begin to actualize here in its final phase, where obsessive desire is fully addressed to be alchemized. Traditionally, this decan was correlated with depravity, degeneracy, corruption, and vice. And it is the place where one comes face to face with the fears and longings lurking within one's watery depths. Scorpio 3 is where Venusian vice appears as fantasy in variant forms of what I call the false flesh, the mortal materiality that inevitably falls away. As Austin Coppock paints it, this space of Scorpio is the black crow the Corvus Nigredo phase in alchemy, where putrefaction occurs. Desire, lust, obsession, debauchery, corruption, depravity, violence, and vice are pecked at by the crow to be decomposed back into their prima materia. It is the archetypal encounter with the Jungian shadow in the dark night of the soul, the symbolic nekia by which our ghosts may be summoned to guide us. The third decan of Scorpio corresponds to the Seven of Cups minor arcana, the Lord of Debauch, bringing to light actions that proceed from being enamored of an illusion and wrestling with one's own desirous nature and the confrontation with the nature of desire itself. The decan's ruler Venus corresponds to the Empress, and the Death card corresponds to the sign of Scorpio in the major arcana. When the Seven of Cups appears, it asks you to take action on bringing forth your wishes and desires to fulfill them instead of guarding them as fantastical daydreams. Christopher Marmolejo, author of Red Tarot, reiterates Venus's power in this card. Quote, mesmerized by the objects of desire, she must realize herself the snake charmer before the cobra consumes her whole. End quote. The Seven of Cups reflects back to us our overwhelm with our longing, and it reminds us that we have the choice to overcome or be overcome by our hungers. Scorpio Decan 3 requires direct experience through self-inquiry to dig at the root of all desire that otherwise remains unconscious and perilous. It beseeches us to cultivate through inner awareness an outward understanding of human behavior, but not without loving compassion that Venus also generously grants. The potential here is the transmutation of moral and spiritual transgressions into pathways of redemption that convert vice into virtue, obsession into devotion. The lunation is also happening in the 17th lunar station, which correlates with Anuradha Nakshatra, the sidereal Manzil al-Ikhlil, and the lunar lodge Fang Shu. The boundaries of the 17th lunar station are approximately 27 degrees tropical Scorpio to 10 degrees tropical Sagittarius, or 3 to 16 degrees Vrishika, or sidereal Scorpio. In the Indic tradition, Anuradha Nakshatra is identified by the anchoring stars of the crown of the Scorpius constellation, which are Akrab, or Beta Scorpii, Shubha, or Delta Scorpii, and Fang, or Phi Scorpii. Anuradha is known as the propitious star, and in Sanskrit, Anuradha translates as following Radha, indicating favorability by Radha, Krishna's consort. The symbol for this asterism is a row or ridge, which represents the pinnacle of success, and a lotus flower, which represents purity of consciousness untainted by the mud of material reality and steadfastness in the face of adversity. Anuradha's regent is Mitra, one of the Adityas and the god of friendship, oaths, and the morning sun. Its planetary ruler is Shani, or Saturn, and Anuradha is associated with the granting of abundance and favorability. Its Shakti is the power to worship. In the Perso-Arabic tradition, al-Ikhlil translates to the crown, denoting the asterism of the crown of the Scorpius constellation as the manzil's anchor or host stars. The symbolic image for this asterism is a monkey in an iron seal, representing cleverness and theft. Al-Iklil comes as the culmination of the succession of the wealth accruing mansions, following the 15th and 16th mansions. In Al-Iklil, wealth is secured and loss is avoided. The angelic lord of this mantle, according to Picatrix, is Adri, and is invoked in talismanic workings to protect against thieves. Agrippa names the angelic being as Adriel and prescribes talismans for improvements in fortune and for love's endurance. Elections were cast in this mansion to get away with deception, for besiegement of cities, for safe travels by water, to stabilize buildings, and for the endurance of friendship and love. Recommended fumigations are with saffron and aromatic woods. In the Chinese tradition, feng shui translates as the room. Feng is the fourth lodge within the sky quadrant of the azure dragon of the east, and the planetary ruler in this tradition is the sun, and the determinative star is Fang, or Pi Scorpii, for which the shu or lodge is named after. The symbol for this asterism is the belly of the azure dragon. Fang holds the totem of the rabbit, who is considered to be a servant of an entity related to the elixir of life and therefore a symbol of longevity. The rabbit's traits here are reserved and withdrawn, yet independent within groups, humble, submissive, and avoiding confrontation. Brave when faced with danger, however, and is associated with gifted healers. Those born with the moon here were also said to have the potential to develop skill in management and selling. Feng Shui is said to confer wealth, prosperity, happiness, longevity, and honor, and was connected to the opening of closed things. Bird sacrifices and offerings of wine and meat are recommended when doing rituals with the moon here. The new moon and Mercury Cazimi are also making an alignment with the stars of the Lupus constellation and specifically Alpha Centauri of the Centaurus constellation. Alpha Centauri or Centauri is located at the projected zodiacal longitude of 29 degrees tropical Scorpio and marks the left foot of Centaurus or Centaurus. Alpha Centauri is a triple star system consisting of Rigel Centaurus or Alpha Centauri A, Toliman, Alpha Centauri B, and Proxima Centauri or Centauri, Alpha Centauri C. Proxima Centauri is actually the closest star to the Sun at 4.25 light years away, while Rigel Centaurus and Toliman, Alpha Centauri A and B, are the nearest stars visible to the naked eye. Traditionally, Alpha Centauri was referred to as Toliman and has alternated with the three names, with most recently taking on the name Bungola, in case you see these names being interchanged in reference to this star. Ptolemy classified Toliman as having the nature of Venus and Jupiter combined and was associated with having a fatalistic attitude, positions of honor, and granting the native refinement possibilities and friends who come to the native's assistance. Vivian Robson also points out that the stars of the horse part of Centaurus are said to give hard-heartedness, inclination to vengeance, love of arms, strong passion, and an energetic nature, and may be connected with poisons, an allusion to Chiron, who is said to be represented by the constellation. Moon with Alpha Centauri may indicate diplomacy, secret bad habits, excessive drinking, involvement with disputes, but emerging successfully. And the Sun with Alpha Centauri may indicate enviousness, self-centeredness, slow but successful progress, increase in enemy because of this, and loss of inheritance. Mercury, when aligned with Alpha Centauri, may indicate changeability, vacillation, fault finding, being difficult to please, having a strong intellect, business success, or trouble in domestic affairs through enemies, family sickness, and disappointed ambitions. Elspeth Eberton writes in Fixed Stars and Their Interpretation that Alpha Centauri may also indicate the spoiling of relationships to female persons, or existing relationships are stricken by exceptional circumstances, disturbances, riots, periods of storm and stress, and revolt against the curtailment of freedom. I think what Elspeth Eberton wrote about Alpha Centauri is really interesting considering the political crises many of us are currently facing in the world today. It just seems incredibly pertinent that this new moon in Mercury Cazimi is making an alignment with this star.
Yeah, just like to add to the
Yeah,
lunar mansion thing.
yeah,
Al Booney writes that the crown or Al Ilkil urges malice and corruption, both unnefarious and nefarious things are done. Do not travel or marry. Do not do most things.
yes. Take heed,
Do not do most things.
take heed, fellow traveler and stranger in the wild. Just stay home and chill the F out. I can't get it out of my mind with everything that's been happening around like, political revelations. It feels like the veils are being lifted from a lot of people's eyes. Though I feel like a good number of us already were anticipating these things. And it's almost like, I don't know if you feel this way, but oftentimes whenever I hear about like breaking news, I just feel like it's confirming things we already knew, you know? And with,
Yeah, I feel that way too, but like, one of the things that I like to think about though, like I really try to set myself in other people's situations, and like we as astrologers like spend a lot of time thinking about this type of stuff.
yeah,
And everybody else is not everybody else, but a lot of people are really just trying to live their lives.
yeah,
And you know, and one of the things that I like to say about like these ancient prescriptions and or revelations around fixed stars or their mansions or all these other things is like one of the points of astrology is to know when something's going to disrupt or deregulate us. And so when there's so many like harrowing like concepts being thrown about via these ancient texts and stuff like that, like it's not because like everything's about like doom and gloom. Like it's trying to set us in a not an anticipation for doom and gloom, but because we all want the base. And the base is calm, smooth waters, safe sailing, pleasure, abundance, love, gratitude, like light, like we want to have a good time. We want to have an easy road to travel on. We want to have gifts. This is the base that we all desire. And these do not do most things. Like these types of prescriptions are like are like there to or to help you know uh tighten down the hatches, batten down the hatches, tighten up our situation so that we can sail into the storm uh aware and armed with the knowledge
yeah,
of the future.
yeah. To use premonition on to have premonition on our side so that we can prepare and foresee what's to come and be ready to brace it. The I think the general significations of this lunar mansion too are pretty auspicious around wealth and honor. That seemed to be like a recurring theme. Um, but it is the crown stars of the Scorpius constellation, so you know, um, it's
It's
heating some
intense.
caution around that with like, yeah, like deception and trickery. I think is also in there in the Picatrix. But and then Albuni saying, yeah, I'm looking at Jay Hamady's wonderful Procession of the Night Theater. as a reference. Yeah, do not travel or marry, do not do most things. And yeah, and this is really interesting in light of like the opposition to Uranus that this new moon is placing too. And my child's cousins just walked by. I don't know if you could hear them, but they were like greeting me, so I just kind of had to wave to them.
Very Uranian. You brought up Uranus and you had a Uranus event.
I had
Great.
a Uranus moment. Uranus follows me everywhere I go. Yeah. Um yeah, this is like uh yeah, it's definitely going to be a really interesting new moon and the start of a really intense lunar cycle, in my opinion, because so I just keep thinking about just current events, and one of the things that has been coming to light is with the Epstein files, all the revelations around Epstein's involvement with Israeli intelligence networks,
It's not
creating.
even the files, it's just the emails. We've just
Yeah,
got the
the
email.
emails are just the ones that came to the surface recently, and they're pressing to release the files from the Department of Justice in the United States. And then Trump immediately, his advisors, are telling him to begin this investigation, because if they start this investigation, a criminal investigation of the files, then they won't be able to release them to the public. So that's been brought up as well. And so what interests me around that is with this new moon being in Scorpio, a sign that likes to dig to the heart of things, to try to uncover deception. Scorpio can expose things as well as Sagittarius. Sagittarius takes it to the next level.
Yeah. I encourage people to look at both sides of every key word. Like, so we'll take a word like deception, and you can create an image of that as the deceiver and the one trying to reveal who the deceiver is. And both of those are implied in each keyword. And you can do that with every keyword in the zodiac of like the receiver of the thing and the pursuer of the thing. There's this magnetic quality that exists in reality of always this push and pull dynamic in the zodiac, and you feel that in the oppositions of the signs, and you also feel that in the diurnal nocturnal expression of the signs, and their custodians, quote unquote, rulers. But like, yeah, I think it's an important thing for people to explore when they're learning astrology, to try to see every word from two angles, from two opposing viewpoints. Because I feel like there's the murderer and there's also the victim and there's also the person trying to find the murderer. Like there's a dynamic quality, and that dynamic quality, like there's a reason why Mars rules like war, but like who's warring, whose side are you on? And like that's why my favorite image for Mars is I have this photograph of a protester facing off against a riot geared police officer. Both are Mars. They're both Marsing.
Yeah.
They just have different moralistic opinions on what that means.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's all about perspective. And I brought that up because so these things were being exposed in this lunar cycle that began with the new moon in Libra and culminated with the Taurus full moon. And then following the Taurus full moon, we have Mercury stationing retrograde at 6 degrees Sagittarius and then conjunct Mars, and then they perfect their conjunction, which represents this exposure. This all of a sudden the emails were released, and this was thanks to a senator, I believe, who pressed for that. So it's interesting because I was also looking at the Aries Ingress for 2025, And notice that the midhaven of the Aries ingress is at 28 degrees,
Oh,
Scorpio.
wow.
So the is taking place right on that MC. And then the moon in
Nothing to see here.
the moon in the Aries ingress is at 6 degrees Sagittarius. So this this Mercury station occurred right on the moon of the Aries ingress. And then this new moon is going to take place on the MC of the Aries ingress. And we were also looking at the Sibley chart. It's like happening in the US's 12th house in the Sibley chart, you know? So it's like, yeah, there's all of this, all these hidden matters coming to light, but tying it to like the public
Secrets
image of like
exposed.
the leader of the hegemonic empire. And the full moon in tropical Gemini, which is the culmination of that new moon in Scorpio, which that's why I was like thinking about how Scorpio and Sagittarius work in this manner of exposing things. And then, you know, Scorpio can be very they're both relentless signs. And, you know, Scorpio digs and brings things to the surface, but then Sagittarius somehow finds a way to bring benefit from whatever is exposed, like it, you know, finding fault or uncovering the truth for Sagittarius isn't this frivolous or vindictive thing. It's about improvement and expanding one's knowledge and expanding one's growth, you know? So
Yeah, like a good metaphor I like to use for that kind of is like, and this is a common metaphor for Scorpio, but like Scorpio creates this compost, like
mhm,
this like taking death and these dark things and like and like breaking it down and trying to find like the root source of them. And then Sagittarius grows food with it.
yeah, yeah, Sagittarius creates the organic farm from that compost.
Yeah.
It makes granola. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm really excited about this new moon. Um, it's going to be intense, and we can talk about how, you know, how to work with it, and everything. We'll talk more about that. But I was just really blown away also by some of the things that you uncovered with this lunation, because you did your own research um beforehand and found out that there's never, because this is a very rare event to have the new moon coinciding with Mercury Cazimi. That is really, really rare. And just how rare is it, Reverend? Please do tell.
Yeah, so like, well, first of all, it's important to like introduce a bunch of like timing things that are
Yeah,
happening. And so like, the cycle between the sun and the moon can easily be tracked and has been being tracked since the Babylonian era of like a 19-year cycle. Like if you
yeah,
take a new moon like this and you type in a 19 year, you go back 19 years and you're going to have a new moon in roughly around the same place. And you can just do that over and over and over again. It's the beauty of the sun and moon relationship. And
inner cycle.
uh, yeah, so in that process, there's 19 years, and within that are these 7 years of the moon basically creating two new moons in one zodiacal sign. And that happened this year. And we had the extra bonus of one of the new moons being an eclipse, and that was in Virgo season.
Yeah,
Um, so that's wild and fun. So so we're at this point in the cycle where basically the the moon cycle is resetting. It's gonna be in the new moon's gonna be repeating in the last part of each zodiacal sign for this year, and then slowly the new moons will regress through the zodiac, and eventually we'll end up with two new moons. So that's a very important part of the moon sun relationship. And then Mercury's cycle uh is a 20-year long cycle where the elements that Mercury is retrograding through changes every 4 years. And so you have this kind of like offset 20-year cycle that Mercury is going through. And so because of this 1920 like sort of like shift, uh the only real date that I could find, I just used the AstroSeek ephemeris search just to be like completely transparent. I put in the sun, the moon, and Mercury all in Scorpio, all at 28 degrees. Like that's the search that I did. You can repeat the search online. If you don't have an account with AstroSeek, I highly recommend it. They've got a lot of lovely tools. And what ended coming up is a few dates, but the only one that really linked up properly with what we're looking at is 1482, and
Yeah.
like nothing before that. Like I typed in 500 BCE, which is as far back as their ephemeris search goes, and really 1482 was the only date that came up like this with the retrograde Mercury and the new moon, and AstroSeek corrects, for which we went through a kind of like a mental breakdown over of
Yeah. The Julian
AstroSeek
calendar.
corrects AstroSeek corrects for the Julian Gregorian difference in their ephemeris search.
Yeah.
So yeah, and so we came up I came up with this date of 1482, and then we found some really interesting historical things that I think have a resonance with what we're experiencing, and I think you
Definitely.
found some stuff that does too.
Yeah, I was really, really fascinated by that discovery. And I love that you did that. Because I love digging into the ephemeris and looking back of like these synchronicities. And so it just really blew me away too with kind of some of the mirroring events that are taking place. So that lunation occurred at uh, 27 degrees, right? Tropical
I
Scorpio.
believe so, yeah. Something like that. Yeah, really close. As close
Yeah.
as you could get.
The Julian calendar for 1482 was on November 11th, 11/11, and the new moon happened at 27 degrees 46 arc minutes of tropical Scorpio with Mercury at 28 degrees, still within a degree of the heart of the sun. And
And
the south,
it was a solar
it
eclipse.
was a solar eclipse. The south node is at 17 degrees there. It was a solar eclipse with Mercury Cazimi as well. So it was really, really striking off the bat, even if we weren't comparing these lunations with the one that's coming up. It just draws your attention to say, okay, what was significant about this time? And so this is when the Granada Wars began, which basically signaled the end of the Islamic period in the Iberian Peninsula and the collapse of al-Andalus. So this is when the Spanish royals, quote unquote, reclaimed Spain, or reconquered. They call it the Reconquista, you know. But this signaled like the end of over 800 years of Muslim rule. And during that time, the Muslim, Jewish, and Christian members of society lived in relative peace, with some uprisings occurring. And then that finally led to this period where the crown of Castile and Aragon wanted to take control of the entire peninsula. And so they started with all these raids, and it started in 1482 and it ended in 1492. So this began like a 10-year period, and 1492 was just 2 years before the Spanish crown sponsored Colon, or Christopher Columbus, Cristobal Colon, to set sail and discover a new route to the Indies, and ended up getting lost and was rescued by indigenous people in the Caribbean. And this is why we are in this big mess today. So there's like a pretty pivotal moment, I feel, with this new moon.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, and you.
And
Mhm.
go
I
ahead.
was just
Sorry.
gonna say, you were looking at some of the great conjunctions as well, and noticed the great conjunctions of like the this is a good time to maybe talk about the great conjunctions and the planetary conjunctions. But you wanted to say something about this before I go into that.
Yeah, sure. Well, actually, first of all, you inspired a memory of mine, and that's that I think it's like when we talk about this change of the Iberian Peninsula from Islamic rule to Christian rule, and this really hard period of time for this area. Um,
Yeah.
one of the things that I know about this region from being a butcher is
Mm.
that one of the reasons why I kind of like harmonize with this Islamic period of ruling over the Iberian Peninsula is is because they allowed people to continue to practice their own structure. And
Mhm.
so there's this charcuterie product called Yamon, and it's cured Spanish pig, and it's specifically this black Iberian uh, acorn grazing uh, pig that they one of the things I love about it is they give this pig this all this like region to like graze upon. People commonly have this idea about pigs about being these dirty animals, and like it just comes from humans trying to pen them in into such small spaces because
Yeah.
pigs rut for their food, which is very scorpionic. Digging in for their nutrition, and the Iberian black pig like gets like 42 acres to like roam and like find its food sources and stuff like that. And the Islamic rule like allowed these monks to continue their practice of like raising these pigs and stuff like that, even though like pork is not a allowed food in their own personal practice and so
Yeah.
forth and so on. And so I have like a whatever a butcher connection to that period of like of appreciating that like respect
Mhm.
because of that respect and not being a domineering controlling force of a people's ideas and things of that nature, like we still have this like uh, living tradition of having access to this type of food and to this preservation uh, that's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, thousands of years.
Yeah.
And it's this like usurpation of that period that we then step into this colonial construct of disavowing people from the ability to continue practicing their traditions and beliefs. And you just like stirred that memory up by like talking about that and like how
Yeah.
it's kind of so pivotal that like because one of the things that I found and without going into the when I in 2020 I started doing a bunch of research about like colonialism and like the heart of colonialism and like where did it start? What does it come from? Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And when I read the indigenous people's history of the United States, they talked about the doctrine of discovery, and so I actually went back and like read those documents, and you can still find them on the Catholic Church like website, and they've never been disavowed. And there's actually this indigenous movement to disavow, to get the church to publicly disavow the doctrines of discovery.
Yeah.
And they were in 1455 and 1452, and they basically talk about how they're like giving people the rights to take over lands and to take over new discovered territories, and that they have the moral obligation to convert people to Christianity. Like it's an indoctrination that like this is how you should go. And in 1482, this culminated because Portugal was seeking, in 1455, Portugal crown royals were seeking the basically the blessing from the Pope to start setting up colonies in Africa
Mm.
and in West Africa. And in 1482, this culminated with the first Portuguese fort being set up on the Gold Coast. And that's when this colony was established. And it's just, yeah, it's really meaningful.
Yeah, there's still remnants of that here in Benin, the Republic of Benin, where I'm at, which is Dahomey, the Dahomey Kingdom. Because yeah, there's like the Portuguese fort that they just renovated and they're gonna turn into a museum. Porto Novo is still carrying the Portuguese name, you know. So it went from like Portuguese to the Dutch to the French, and even Togoland, which is nearby. We're bordered by Togo and Nigeria, to the east and the west, and Burkina Faso and Niger to the north. And Togo was also colonized by the Portuguese, and then like the Germans had like a long stronghold there. So a lot of people speak German there, but then they also speak French because the French, you know, they were battling, they were trying to colonize this whole region. And um, one of the things that Benin is very notorious for among Pan-Africanists, or like on the continent itself, a lot of uh, Africans respect the Dahomeans because they fought off the colonizers like the strongest. And so
For
people,
centuries.
yeah, and they also just talk about, I have friends from Cameroon and from Senegal, and they've said similar things about how um, people really respect Benin or the Dahomean kingdom or the Dahomean descendants because the Fon, basically the Fon, practice voodoo because like their magic is like, or you know, their magical system is like pretty powerful. And so like that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, it's so relevant because I feel like, you know, tying it into like the current hegemonic power back then, you know, the hegemony was, we could say, you know, it was being battled between Spain and England or the UK. You know, they were really wanting to, they they were in competition with each other. And I remember studying this in art history class, but and other history classes, but it came up a lot in art history because of politics and art. And but yeah, because of like what's happening now in the United States, and with like, you know, white supremacist Christian white supremacist, you know, wanting to revert back to this time of servitude and enslavement and slavery. And then also now with the rise of like AI and then robots, it's like they're really, it they're careless about people. And it's like they can enslave robots, you know, even if they can't enslave people, they'll enslave these robots, right? So that's one thing. But it's just really interesting to look at also with like the planetary conjunctions, which you and I, we were looking at that. And so basically the planetary conjunctions, I've talked about this before, but not necessarily on video. And I'm planning to do a more like educational video about this because I feel it's something that is overlooked often. Like I think we've had astrologers speak on the Great Conjunction a lot because the most recent one occurring around the solstice of 2020 in Aquarius, and it signaled the start of this 240-year period with the conjunctions between Saturn and Jupiter being in air signs now. And we had a Saturn Jupiter conjunction or great conjunction in 1980, I want to say, right? Or 19 in the early 80s in Libra,
Yeah, it's
which was
1980.
what's that?
It was in 1980, yeah.
Yeah, it was in 1980. And that was like a doorway or like there's like an introductory conjunction into this greater period of time. And then we had the last great conjunction in earth signs, I think it was in Taurus in 2000. And then the one in Aquarius happened most recently in 2020, and that ushers in this age of air. And so we've heard astrologers talk a lot about the great conjunctions, but what gets overlooked are the middle and the lesser conjunctions. And these were said to distribute the significance of the great conjunction, right? So the great conjunction is the planetary conjunction that occurs between Saturn and Jupiter. And that occurs every 20 years and chronicles these greater periods of centuries by their triplicity. So we're in the triplicity of air now. The Persian astrologer Al-Junawadi said that the Great Conjunction marks chapters in the larger annals of the history of religions, dynasties, kings, and world events. And Saturn takes 30 years to go through the entire zodiac. And in that period, Mars completes 2 periods of approximately 15 years each. So Saturn's planetary period is about 30 and Mars is 15. And within that time frame, every 2 years, Mars meets Saturn in an event referred to as the middle conjunction. And the 8th century Persian Jewish astrologer Mashallah described the middle conjunctions of Mars and Saturn to signify the accidents of wars and the contrarieties of battles, which is really important to reflect on with current events, because we'll see this middle conjunction taking place next April in Aries.
Great place for the malefics.
It's fabulous, right? The lesser conjunction is the alignment between Mars and Jupiter, which also occurs every 2 years. And Abu Mashar, the 9th century Persian Muslim astrologer, described the lesser conjunction to represent the predominant engagement of the people in invasion and wars, insurrections, lawsuits, plagues, the death of writing animals, and the demise or the death of heads of state. So this is like really important because we are going to be having a Mars Jupiter conjunction in Leo next year, which is in the sign of DT's ascendant.
Isn't that when the Mars retrograde happens again too?
The Mars will station retrograde soon after that. Yeah, I believe. I'll have
It
to double.
stations retrograde in Virgo and then comes back into Leo.
Yeah, so that comes late. That comes after because that will be in 2027. In early 2027, Mars
Oh, okay.
will station retrograde at I think at like 10 Virgo. I was looking at that too because of my Virgo placements. But the lesser conjunction of Mars and Jupiter next year will be in November. We also had one in Gemini last year. So it's every 2 years, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the one in 2024 occurred in Gemini, which was in the sign of Donald Trump's son.
Sun.
Yeah, and I think he has other placements in there. Saturn's important as the indication for matters of beginnings, like religions, dynasties, and whatever lasts a long time. So the Persian astrologers saw Saturn in these planetary configurations in particular as indicating the beginning of these epochs, because it's Saturn governs long spans of time. And then Jupiter was an indicator for laws. So when Jupiter is conjunct Saturn or Mars, it marks these like longer periods of specific structures around laws. And then when Jupiter is conjunct Mars every 2 years, it is the sign for breaking down those laws or bringing corruption to those laws. So Mars is the indicator for war, strife, and corruption, and the destruction of order. But what was interesting about all of that is that basically in 1482, around the time of this lunation, it was in between the lesser conjunction in Leo. There was a Mars Jupiter conjunction in August 1481, and then there
Whoa.
was a middle conjunction in Libra. Mars and Saturn conjoined at 21 Libra in November, a year almost to the day of this new moon. But yeah, it was, the start of the defeat of Granada and its annexation by Castile, ending the last remnant of Islamic rule on the Iberian Peninsula, which brought about really this advancement on not just the Iberian Peninsula, but in Europe as well. They had the most extensive library system. There were all these translations being done into Arabic and then into Latin even. We have the Picatrix thanks to this period as well. A lot of beneficial things came out of this time when the Iberian Peninsula was governed by the caliphates that were very much interested in a magical worldview. And yeah, the aftermath of the crown taking al-Andalus, like the final stronghold of al-Andalus was Granada, the region of Granada. It brought this end to the coexistence between the three, Abrahamic religions in the area. There was sort of forceful conversion to Christianity being imposed. The Muslims allowed for Jews to practice their religion and Christians to practice their religion. But once the Christians took over, everybody was being forced to convert to Christianity or to be exiled. And then also there was a plague, like a resurgence of the Black Plague, the bubonic plague that came about in the medieval era in the 13th century. Wasn't completely wiped out until hundreds of years later. And so we saw these resurgence of the plague come up, and 1481 to 1484 was one of those resurgent chapters of the plague, which I thought was interesting in looking at this because of the middle conjunction and the lesser conjunction also. Like, so basically the middle conjunction would have signaled plague as well, and we saw that happening the year that this started to come about again in 1481. Yeah, and so it made me think about, what are like the similarities with the chart of this year and the parallel topics. We see a lot of like Islamophobia, a lot of wanting to return to slavery, and then there's the ongoing pandemic, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Like, as far as like the slavery goes and stuff like that, one of the things that's important with what so I did some more research, and I found out that like that Portuguese stronghold in West Africa, like Portugal didn't like directly help with the Reconquista or the with Spanish retaking over the Iberian Peninsula. However, there's like an indirect funding going on because the Catholic Church basically funded three-quarters of that effort of retaking the Iberian Peninsula. And, the Catholic Church is receiving funds from, multiple countries via church taxes. And Portugal was getting mad rich off of all of its efforts that it had been doing from 1455 up until that area. So the retaking of the Iberian Peninsula was being funded, indirectly by the slave trade, by everything that Portugal was doing in its relationship to Africa. And so I just kind of wanted to point that out. And that the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition was, kind of founded and started in 1478 and then like really started getting going in 1480. And so you have this underlying current of like persecution on top of like a militaristic effort, so like there's not just like wars being fought between armies of states, but also like the people being attacked in their homes and being, their estates being confiscated. And then to like contextualize that into now is like, what is ICE doing? ICE is a militaristic force that's basically an inquisition. It's an inquisition of people of different cultures. They're being targeted for their skin color. There's, and then as far as like the slavery aspect goes, like just last year alone, I think I saw like maybe 50,000 people get laid off of their tech jobs because of AI coming in, like this just like sweeping displacement. And the uh the other place that I wanted to go with this is just this like this this rise, like you've already mentioned it a couple of times, but this rise of Christian authoritarianism that I don't even really think Trump believes in at all, but it's just like the coattails that he's riding into power, like the tiger that he's riding into power. And
Exactly.
um and I think that part of what needs to that we should like recognize in the moment, it's about controlling the narrative of the story of like what is the United States. And we just got done with this period of time where Uranus was going through Aries and Uranus was going through Taurus, and we had these uprisings of like Occupy Wall Street, of Black Lives Matter, of George Floyd as like totems for the uprisings, of like pushing against this narrative, tearing down these colonial statues, trying to establish a different narrative. And that's really what the ideological push is about. And like Trump's administration is trying to maintain the torch that of what American exceptionalism is, who George Washington is, what slavery was about, like, just like trying to maintain control of this narrative that we've been pushing against. Uh, and I just think that that's part of the tension here. I don't think it's on the same side though. I don't think that like if I'm reflecting back on this 1482 period, I'm seeing I'm seeing an established power of the Islamic period receiving this like insurgence that wasn't like new. Like there were constant efforts to try to get like Christian control over the Iberian Peninsula before this, but there was like a new economic like boon they were like able to use to help push themselves. And I kind of feel like there's like a different narrative going on. Like I don't, because I feel like as much as I so I need to preface that I don't have anything against personal Christians in my life or anything like that. But as far as these like political Christian figures go who present a specific ideological purpose, I don't feel like they have this like this like wave mentality of like overthrowing something that's already established. I feel like they are the establishment and they're
Yeah,
pushing against a wave that's building. At least
yeah, exactly. It's
that's
really nothing, you know. And they're just um I feel like the mask has been ripped off of the face of the settler nation, you know, because it's like there's these and there's been for a long time subculture, counterculture movements exposing that. And the dominant culture has pretty much brushed those people aside and said like, oh, you guys are freaks and you know, or weirdos and blue
we're
haired,
gonna
like
assassinate you, we're gonna criminalize you, we're gonna put
yeah,
you in jail, we're gonna
yeah, we're gonna label you mentally ill, all that stuff, right? You know, just any way to subvert and suppress the truth. And um, but for I think a good amount of time, people have been bringing awareness about to the reality of the United States, but I think the dominant culture has had a hard time accepting it, you know. So it's always been found among like the rebels and like the counterculture movements, like where people really understand the struggle of you know marginalized people who have historically been marginalized, you know. And now it's just the mask has been ripped off, and more and more people are starting to see it for what it really is. And so it's like a really dangerous moment because now the beast is scared of being exposed and is gonna lash out, and you know it's gonna fight back, and it has all this you know technological warfare planned out, or just that it's been tested on, you know, in Palestine, for example. You know, it's everything is so interconnected, and with what's happening in Palestine and in Africa and in the United States and in other places. um but yeah, I think it's really it's kind of it's like a really critical moment, because especially with like I mean the whole thing around like Epstein, with what they were creating, these honey trap bribe schemes, you know, to and it's all these people that are in positions of power or even were critics of Israel, you know. Like Noam Chomsky was in there, and he's like one of the biggest critics of Israel. So he like really messed up in that way. It's like, why are you going to entertain this guy? You know that this person is a criminal, has is a sex offender, and still you're going to hold court with him and talk politics with him. It's just anyway, that was I think that's been like a big blow for a lot of people, you know. But this came out like 2 years ago, even about Noam Chomsky. You know, I think they were exposing that, but it's just kind of brought it to the surface again, and so more people are understanding about like this kind of like they're realizing that some of the conspiracies are not really conspiracies. I think it's really timely with it happening in Scorpio season, and this like new moon is going to represent like the end of this cycle. Like Mercury is under the beams, it's going to be in the heart of the sun during this lunation, and then Mars is ruling this lunation, and it's also under the beams now for 4 months, and it's in aversion to the new moon, so it's not able to supply any like support. And there's it's like all of this came out right before Mars and Mercury go under the beams. And so now there's like this period of time where things are simmering, and like, you know, Trump is like the most referenced person in those emails. Like his name comes up the most out of everybody's, is what I've gathered. And so he was like, someone shared that he was playing like Phantom of the Opera from the White House like the day after. Like he's really going through it, right? But um it kind of puts people on alert, because we know when narcissistic sociopathic personality types, like they're not just going to cower and hide, like they're going to lash out even stronger now, right? So like that's like
Yeah,
the,
like
yeah, no, I was just gonna say, like with the new moon, it's just like this kind of like midway point between that revelation and then when we have the full moon in Gemini, like 2 weeks after the new moon. But I think uh what's interesting is like that star Alpha Centauri, and what Elsbeth Eberton says about how this can bring about revolts when freedom is being curtailed. And that's like a pretty strong description of what's happening now, and so I'd like to see it as like this indication for people knowing that they can't unsee everything now, and we have to
yeah.
continue to apply pressure um and not give in to that whitewashing narrative that they've been trying to implement, and it's so yeah. But that's like a whole, I feel like that's like a whole other rant. I do feel like
I
people need
just want to
to be organized. Yeah.
I just want to say one more thing about Trump's chart for this lunation, though, is like if you're using a porphyry house system, um, this lunation is square from his fourth house, from the bottom of his chart, from like in a porphyry
Yeah.
system, like the DC and MC point to the absolute highest and lowest part of the chart, and
Yeah.
Uranus is on his MC and
Yeah.
or as close to his MC, and this lunation is on the bottom of his like his deepest, darkest like roots and stuff like
Wow.
that. So
That is really fascinating. Just digging up all his skeletons and the Uranus on his MC. It's like,
yeah, and we
yeah,
saw that already be like really important for him too, because like when Uranus and Mars conjoined on his
with Gemini.
MC, he almost got assassinated.
Yeah, and some people are saying, I mean, they've been saying that since the beginning, but that it was possibly staged. And so maybe we'll see more of a confirmation of that, right? Like more proof of whether or not that was fake or real. Um, so hard to believe anything around his persona, you know.
Anything. Yeah.
um, yeah. So I don't know. I think it's like a really interesting new moon around that. Now, on a more personal level, like we kind of talked about like the month,
Yeah.
a little bit on a more
Yeah.
personal level, I
Let's
think
take a breath. Let's take a breath.
take a
Let's
deep breath.
ground
You're
ourselves.
going to take a collective breath, touch your shoulders. um, yeah, I think, it's a significant new moon for fixed signs, and for the 12th part of this lunation, it lands in Libra. So you were saying about this, about looking at your Libra house or just Libra placements. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, yeah. I feel like Libra and just really hasn't been able to get a break for a while from some of these things. The Aries full moon also lit up the 12th part of Libra,
Yeah.
and and it has also been like signifying like that that last eclipse that we had in Virgo, and so there's like this mismatch happening there. And so just let that Libra story. I just think that a good advice is just to let that Libra story continue to play out, whichever house it signifies in your chart. And then also, I've been seeing a lot of fear or anxiety, I should say better, around Uranus's return to Taurus and it being opposite this lunation. And one of the things that I really feel about this, like for me personally, Uranus through Taurus, like lit up my entire chart, like for 7 years. Like I experienced Uranus and Taurus on a deep level in so many ways. As
Yeah.
soon as it entered, as just to run through it quickly, as soon as it entered in Taurus, it opposed my Pluto, and then it opposed my moon, and then it opposed my Saturn, and it conjoined my Venus, and then it opposed my Mars and conjoined my sun. Like it was like a very lived experience. But
Yeah.
I just want people to think about the fact that like whatever Uranus radicalized in the Taurus part of your chart over the last 7 years, this is just a reminder of that and not like a new it's not new. Uranus is tired. Uranus is tired of Taurus stuff. It wants to move on to Gemini. Uranus
Mhm.
isn't the type of planet that like it doesn't like feel forlorn towards things. Uranus isn't the type of energy that's like, oh, but if only I could be back in Taurus. Like that's not a Uranus energy. Uranus is like, oh, I forgot this one thing. I just want to tweak this little thing. Like the mad scientist being like, oh wait, I there's this screw that I just need to tighten this much and then I'm done. It's more like that sort of energy. So I don't think people should be too worried about like Uranus coming back to Taurus and fucking up their life or messing up their life again. It's just coming back to like tweak a couple of things and then move back on to whatever Gemini is doing in your chart. So I don't feel like this is about on a personal level for everybody. I just don't think that Uranus is the focus of this lunation. I, it's definitely more about what's going on in Scorpio and also a subtle continuation of Libra energy that you may have been experiencing from the full moon.
And that subtle continuation is being indicated by the 12th part of the degree of the new moon landing in Libra, just to be clear for those who are interested in that. And yeah, that is really, really interesting. I have seen a lot of people talking about um, their trepidation around Uranus being back in Taurus and also, getting close to Algol again. And yeah, I think Uranus, this is also like the annual opposition, like the opposition that Uranus makes to the sun. So this is actually a time of year when we can actually see Uranus with the naked eye or with binoculars even, because it's in opposition, so the sun is like really illuminating it. And but there's like this astronomer or like a geophysicist. I'll have to research him again, but I noticed his work years ago because he's been tracking the Uranus oppositions with like tectonic activity and like earthquakes and all of that. And
Mm.
so I wonder if this is going to set off some sort of like earthquake activity on the planet. Um, but it is definitely um I understand the need to like kind of reassure each other like through this, right? We've already gone through, the Mars opposition to Uranus, and so I feel like it's not going to be as intense as that per se. and Mercury is in the picture this time. And so the Mercury Uranus opposition, I do feel like it's something around technology and communication and um, being in a Mars ruled sign. There's possible indications around, you know, espionage and war tactics, even, and those things we might not see right away, like on the day of the new moon, but it'll be tied somehow to that new moon, to this lunation. And yeah, what I
On a
tend to.
on a personal level, would you say that that would be like somebody talking shit about you behind your back at work? Like espionage, espionage on the personal level?
Right. Or yeah, I mean, if you're in the enemies of the moon period, right? Yeah. If you're in a perfected month where it's indicated. That's one thing about like kind of these general predictive, breakdowns. Like it's going to be so different for everybody depending on so many other factors, your solar revolution, your monthly revolution. We were going to talk about like how people might be personally affected and what they can do around this time. I've been doing like a series on the magical plant allies, but I'm taking a pause from it because
Yeah,
it's
I enjoyed
actually.
your Libra one.
Huh? Yeah.
I enjoyed your Libra one. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking of just doing per zodiac season just to kind of, because every 2 weeks making one, it kind of started to burn me out, to be honest. Because I like to present them in a way that is, enjoyable and informative, and include all these like images.
Scholarly.
Yeah. So, um, yeah, I'm gonna bring those back, but with like the zodiac season. And so I might do one for this, just for like for Scorpio. And I have the Taurus one, the slides and everything, so I might put that one out as well, and then just do it for Taurus and in general. um
Mhm.
anyway, but there's like, plants that we can work with. And Scorpio's being is ruled by Mars, and so it has affinity with like martial plants like nettle and ginger and garlic, and but also Hermes Trismegistus associated Scorpio with Artemisia or mugwort. So that would be a
Mm.
useful ally for this lunation. And yeah, and I don't know if you have any sort of like practices or recommendations that you tend to employ.
Well, my first recommendation is always to have a morbid curiosity. Keep your mind open, stay observant, and to release fear or expectation. Um, as far as like spiritual practice, I also learned recently that the Vedic tradition uses the dark moon for connecting with ancestors. Um, I think the dark moon is great for resetting altars, for cleaning spaces, cleaning spiritual spaces. Uh,
Yeah.
there's this long, like kind of like new age tradition of like setting intentions during the dark moon, which I'm using the dark moon, and we both use the term dark moon for the new moon
Yeah,
because
for the
like
human.
just for differentiation, like the new moon is actually when it's visible and it's receiving light from the sun, whereas like the dark moon is this like beautiful harmonic conjunction that that negates duality. Like there's no duality in the dark moon. Like
Yeah.
the duality comes from the relationship of the moon and the sun and the light and the dark and like how they dance together. But the dark moon is a non-dualistic period. And so it's really great for internal work, worshiping deities, finding a dark moon goddess that you align with.
Yeah.
Um, like Hecate is an example, but there's other dark moon goddesses from other cultures that you
Yeah.
might harmonize with differently, or and then just also just like the internal, like working on the internal and reflecting. Like it's the dark moon's really great for reflection. As far as like Mercury goes, the I too have a great relationship with Mercury retrograde. I think I've had and I think this is another example of it, but I've had a lot of really great conversations with people during Mercury retrograde, especially Mercury Cazimis. I've had some really amazing bonding conversations with people during
Yeah.
Cazimi periods. And also, this is actually kind of funny. I have a I have a history with dressing down my boss during Mercury Cazimis. Like I have a history of like of me like post recognizing that like I would have a one-on-one conversation in private with one of my bosses during Mercury Cazimi, in which I just tell them how it is and how I see that the place where our work is going and where I think we're failing, and just like really like give them my 2 cents in a very
Yeah.
private, respectful, like sort of a way, but very honest and straightforward, and being like, I feel like we're failing this person. I feel like this person's causing a mess. And it's not like talking shit and spilling tea or anything like that. It's more about, it's always like directed at the boss, being like, we need to do better for these people. Like, I've had several like real, like, knockdown, drag out, like, conversations. And I've luckily had position in a lot of my jobs where my boss is willing to hear that from me and take it with respect. But that's a sun Mercury conjunction. That is talking to the king, you know. And so like,
And you're
as
in
for
a way advisor in this situation.
say what?
You're in a way his advisor in this situation. You're
Yeah, exactly. I'm coming as an emissary. I'm coming as an advisor, not as like a like an opponent. And I think another way to reframe this on a personal level is to like address your own sovereignty. How do you feel about your kingdom, your land, your custodianship, your domicile, your reign, your perspective on the world? Like, especially where Scorpio lands in your chart, like what house is that? What sovereignty is that for your life? Is it your 11th house of friends and family? Is it or of like friends and colleagues? Is it your fourth house of home? Is it your seventh house of relationships? Like, how do you feel sovereign in those spaces? I think is a good way to reflect when we have this, especially this dark moon, Mercury. Like it's like the queen and the emissary talking to the king about how that land is going, like all at once. And but it's you. It's all you. So how do you feel about shit?
That's really great insight. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And reminded me too of how when I started making offerings to my ancestors a number of years ago, when I started to revive my own personal ancestral veneration, I intuitively did it on the new moons and then started bringing in the full moons. So, yeah, I'd love to find out about other cultures working with the new moon or the dark moon for venerating ancestors. And that's how the Hellenic hearth ceremonies also were tied around that. The dark moon was made offerings to Hecate, who would, transition from the previous lunar cycle into the next. And so, as the queen of the threshold of the crossroads, offerings were made to her, and also the queen of the dead. And then the following day, then offerings would be made to the ancestors. So it was very much tied to that dark moon, new moon, and waxing crescent light. Um, and yeah, and I love what you shared about just the sanctity of the dark moon and finding our sovereignty in that transition. Um, And we didn't talk about Venus, but Venus is co-present, and that is actually the next planet that Mercury will be, conjoining. Well, like this, so this Cazimi, this new moon, is going to represent this transition for not just the moon, but Mercury is moving from evening to morning sky. So Mercury will then rise as a morning star like 5 days later, 4 to 5 days later, and then in conjunction with Venus. And then Venus will be setting, like they're passing the torch to each other. So Mercury's emerging from the underworld and gives Venus her torch to go into the underworld or under the beams.
Passing of the caduceus, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because like Inanna, some of the earliest Inanna depictions, she has the caduceus springing out of her shoulders. So, and the caduceus was associated with like chthonic deities and fertility, and power in that way. So you see it in these like Babylonian deities. But yeah, I really love that, and always try to bring some elements of ritual and practice and veneration around the lunations. I like to try to look at them and dissect like what's going on in the world, or like see how they're reflecting events, and how we can prepare around that, and um and how they show up. So I'm glad that we got to talk a little bit about that. And yeah, and so do you want to, should we pull some cards, like since you're a tarot slinger? It's like, oh, it'd be fun to
Yeah,
like
sure.
what we pull.
Yeah, I'll pull a card for the lunation. To be using my Journey to Oz and Wonderland deck by Mystic Madness Tarot. It's a wonderful combination of the story of Wizard of Oz and Alice in Wonderland. And the thing that I love about this deck is that those two stories contrast each other enough that they're able to really describe the breadth of the tarot, because Alice in Wonderland is this like internal exploration of like choice and identity and things of that nature. Like Alice just trying to figure out who she is, whereas Dorothy's on a grand adventure and like conquering witches and finding friends, and it's like this like outward fiery expression of self. And so they do a good job of like rounding out the fullness of the tarot.
I'm using the Santa Muerte deck.
All right, I'm gonna cut my deck and pull the card.
Cool.
I got, ooh, I believe in this lunation. Mars is in the second decan of Sagittarius,
Yeah, he just enters. He'll be at 11 degrees, I want to say.
right on top of Antares, the projected degree of Antares.
Ooh, good call. The heart of the Scorpion. So actually,
So
in
I
our
got the Nine of Wands, which is the tarot card associated with the second decan of Sagittarius.
oh, amazing.
And it's, in this deck, it's called the White Knight, and is part of Alice's story.
I pulled the Ace of Swords, which I think is
Ooh.
really interesting around beginnings, around especially like ideas and communication. You know, the swords are associated with the air signs, right? So, and that's based on the premise of just a lot of intellectual activity and thought and talking, communication, and which is pretty interesting around the Mercury Cazimi and you pulling the Mars uh Decan, Mars being in the second decan of Sagittarius. Mars wants some attention. Um,
Yeah, and your card reminds me of the fact that there's actually a antitia to Pluto from the latter degrees of Scorpio and a contra antitia from Uranus to Pluto uh, from
yeah.
the latter degrees of Taurus. So there's some interesting insights that our cards are bringing our attention to. The wands are about our fiery passions. They're about our will to create in the world and how we push ourselves out there. The Nine of Wands is a decan that is Sagittarius to a decan that is seen as being ruled by the face of the moon and also Mars. And there's a inherent like defensive quality uh, given to this decan, and I think that I think that maybe one of the things that this lunation may want to draw our attention, that these cards may want to draw our attention to, is this idea of standing your ground, holding true to yourself, maintaining your boundaries, and allowing the waves to crash against your walls. Don't be shooketh. Allow whatever comes up, allow the dust to settle before making any rash decisions.
Mm. Well, thank you. Do you have anything that you want to plug?
Yeah, I guess I just started up a Patreon. It's only got one $3 tier right now. I'm gonna be posting articles on it and isolated videos as well as writings. You can find me being a little bit more active right now on YouTube at selenesgateway.com. You can find some of my older publications, especially this last year where I talked a lot about the passing of my mother on Substack at Esoteric Butcher on my Substack. I talk a lot about the tarot and astrology in some of my older articles if you want to get to know me a little bit better. I'm a very upfront and open person when it comes to my history, my emotions, and my experiences. And what you'll see in the future from me on Selene's Gateway, both on my Patreon and on my YouTube, is a constant exploration of the spiritual side of astrology and how to connect with your chart in a more felt way. And I will be releasing a astrologically focused calendar on my Patreon in the coming months where we sidestep the Gregorian significations and focus solely on the zodiacal seasons and the movement of the moon.
I'm so excited about that. Yeah, because you've been studying the Tithys calendar and other aspects of the Indic tradition around that too. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. So,
Yeah, I've been
should
making sundials and like really living a lived experience of the difference between calculated time, which is what we experience through clocks and the Gregorian calendar, and then felt experiential time, which is what it was all rooted to before Julius Caesar broke the lunar calendar. Like literally broke it.
like literally?
Like he literally smashed the tablet.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't wait to. I love talking with you about all of that too, because you've been a member of my Patreon too, and you've brought some really wonderful like discussion around the topic of the fixed stars um and
Yeah,
astrology.
join Natalia's book club. Like join her Patreon. Join us for the book club. Join us for discussions. Like we have a lot of fun.
Yeah, we have a lot of fun reading heavy scholarly text,
Thick, thick
thick,
scholarly texts.
thick double C. Yeah, I'm excited with what you're working on now with that lunar calendar. And so yeah, join Devon's Patreon, join my Patreon. Thanks so much for joining me and talking about this lunation and
Yeah, it's
bringing
been a pleasure.
thanks to all of my subscribers and listeners and people who tune in. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel as well and subscribe to
Like the video.
like the video, subscribe to Devon's channel as well. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think about this new moon. And yeah, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Ciao.